On the very day she signed the divorce papers, her husband stood hand in hand with the woman he'd been cheating with. But as they said their vows, his wife, carrying his unborn child, walked out with a smile. Why? Because she knew something. They didn't. Something that would change everything. Before we begin, I want to hear from you, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Have you ever had to smile through a heartbreak just to protect your peace? Drop a comment below, and let's connect through our shared strength. The penthouse office of Ava's marketing firm overlooked a city that glittered with ambition, its skyline a jagged promise of power. At 32, Ava commanded the room, her sharp mind and poised presence turning heads as she flipped through a sleek presentation deck. Her assistant, Lena, stood by, outlining a campaign for a luxury brand, her voice steady but cautious. Ava's dark hair was pulled into a low bun, her tailored blazer a shield against the world, but her calm facade hid a storm. Her phone buzzed on the glass desk, a notification flashing, a tabloid article with a grainy photo of her husband, Daniel, his arm around a woman in a dimly lit bar, their closeness unmistakable. Lena's eyes flicked to the screen, her voice faltering. "Isn't that Daniel?" Ava's hand paused, her breath catching, but she forced a smile, her voice smooth despite the ache in her chest. "Let's stay focused on the pitch," she said, her eyes returning to the deck, though the words blurred. Lena nodded, resuming her spiel, but the air was heavy, the photo a silent wound. Inside, Ava's world tilted. She'd known Daniel's late nights, his vague excuses, but seeing it, public, undeniable, cut deeper than suspicion. Her mind flashed to 5 years ago, when she was an intern at his startup, her dreams raw and untested. Daniel, then a charismatic entrepreneur, had swept her into his orbit, his charm a spotlight that made her feel seen. His ambition matched hers, his promises of a shared future sealing their love. They married in a whirlwind, her heart open, his vows a melody she believed. Now, that melody was discord, the photo a crack in the life they'd built. She pushed through the meeting, her voice steady, her notes precise. But the photo lingered, a question she couldn't ignore. Was this woman a fling, or something more? Daniel's distance had grown, missed dinners, curt texts, but she'd blamed his company's expansion, her own long hours. Now doubt gnawed, her trust fraying. She excused Lena, staring at the city, below its lights indifferent to her turmoil. Her hand rested on her stomach, a secret she hadn't shared, a life growing inside her, tying her to a man who might no longer be hers. That evening, the penthouse apartment was a cold contrast to the city's warmth, its marble counters and floor-to-ceiling windows a stage for their unraveling. Ava set the table, her movements deliberate, the clink of plates sharp in the silence. Daniel arrived late, his suit rumpled, his dark hair tousled, his smile strained as he kissed her cheek. "Long day," he said, loosening his tie, his voice casual but distant. They sat, the meal untouched, the air thick with unspoken words. Ava's fingers tightened around her fork, her voice low but steady. "You've been distant lately," she said, her eyes searching his. "Work problems?" He met her gaze, his expression guarded. "I should ask you that," he said, his tone deflecting, a tactic she knew too well. She reached into her bag, her hand trembling slightly, and slid a positive pregnancy test across the table, its stark lines a quiet bombshell. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice soft but unwavering, watching his reaction. Daniel's face froze, his eyes flicking to the test, then away, his jaw tightening. "Now's not the best time," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, his hands clenching the napkin. Ava's heart sank, her breath shallow. "You mean because of her?" she asked, her voice sharp now, the tabloid photo flashing in her mind. He didn't deny it. His silence was a blade, his gaze dropping to the table, unable to meet hers. The room seemed to shrink, the city's glow a distant mockery. Ava stood, her chair scraping the floor, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "I deserve better than this," she said, grabbing her coat and walking out, the doors slam echoing in the emptiness. The city streets swallowed her, the night air cool against her burning cheeks. She walked aimlessly, her hand resting on her stomach, the life inside a fragile anchor. Daniel's silence confirmed what the photo suggested, but the depth of his betrayal was a wound she hadn't prepared for. Was the woman a fleeting affair, or had he built a secret life? Her mind raced, piecing together his late nights, his guarded phone, the way his touch had grown mechanical. She'd given him everything, her love, her ambition, her trust, and now she faced a future alone, with a child he didn't want. Back at the penthouse, Daniel sat motionless, the pregnancy test a stark reminder of his failure. He'd loved Ava once, fiercely, but success had changed him. His empire a hungry beast that fed on his time, his loyalty. The woman, Elise, was a colleague, her charm a distraction that became an affair. He hadn't meant for it to grow, but it had, and now Ava's pregnancy, a joy he should have embraced, felt like a trap. He poured a drink, his hands shaking, knowing he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Ava checked into a hotel, the sterile room a refuge from the penthouse's lies. She stared at her phone, Daniel's missed calls unanswered, her heart torn between rage and grief. A text arrived, not from him but an unknown number. "You're better off without him." Her breath caught, her fingers hovering over the screen. Who sent it? A friend, a stranger, or someone closer, watching her unravel? The message was a spark, igniting questions she couldn't ignore. Did someone know about Daniel's affair? About her pregnancy? The city's hum was a distant pulse, and Ava felt a shift, a resolve hardening within her. The next morning, she returned to the office, her composure a mask. Lena greeted her, concern flickering in her eyes, but Ava deflected, diving into work. The tabloid photo had spread, whispers circling the office, but she held her head high, her focus sharp. Inside, she was a storm. Daniel's betrayal, the pregnancy, the mysterious text, each a thread in a web she couldn't yet untangle. She needed answers not just about the affair, but about the life she'd built, the woman she'd become. Daniel, meanwhile, met Elise at a discreet cafe, his voice low, urgent. "Ava knows," he said, his eyes darting to the door. "She's pregnant." Elise's smile was cool, her hand brushing his. "Then let her go," she said, her voice smooth, calculating. "We're better together." He nodded, but doubt gnawed at him, Ava's face haunting his thoughts. Elise's ambition matched his, but her touch lacked Ava's warmth, her eyes missing the depth he'd once loved. He left the cafe, his mind split, unaware of a figure watching from across the street, their phone capturing the moment. Ava's day ended with another text from the unknown number. "He's with her now." Attached was a photo of Daniel and Elise, their closeness a fresh wound. Her hands trembled, anger surging, but a new clarity emerged. She wouldn't crumble. The pregnancy, her career, her strength, they were hers, not Daniel's to break. But the texts were a puzzle, their sender a shadow she couldn't place. Was it Lena, a colleague, or someone tied to Elise? The city's lights glowed, a promise of truth. But Ava knew the answers were closer, hidden in the life she'd thought she knew. The divorce loomed, a certainty now, but Ava's smile, faint but growing, held a secret. She was planning, not just for herself, but for the child she carried, for a future Daniel couldn't touch. The texts, the affair, the betrayal, they were pieces of a larger truth, one she'd uncover, even as the world watched her walk away. Did this story hit you right in the heart? Go ahead and tap that like button, and if you haven't already, Subscribe for more real emotional stories like this. Drop just one word in the comments. How did this story make you feel? While you are at it, check out the video currently showing on your screen. See you in the next one. What would you do if you found out you were pregnant right as your marriage crumbled? Would you tell your partner? Let us know below. The sting of betrayal sharpened with each anonymous text. The latest, a photo of Daniel and Elise at the cafe, fueling Ava's resolve. Her pregnancy, a secret she guarded fiercely, anchored her as she navigated the wreckage of her marriage. Daniel's silence after their confrontation, his refusal to deny the affair, was a wound that bled into her days, but the mysterious messages hinted at a larger truth. Who was watching, feeding her evidence of his deceit? Lena's concern, the office whispers, and Elise's brazen confidence swirled in her mind, each a possible link to the shadow trailing her. The city's glow was a distant promise, but Ava's faint smile held a plan, a strength Daniel couldn't break. The law firm's boardroom was a cold expanse of glass and steel, the city's skyline a muted backdrop through tinted windows. Ava sat at the polished table, her posture straight, her dark eyes steady as she faced Daniel across the divide. He was flanked by Claire, Elise, as Ava now knew her, a woman with sharp features and a smirk that dripped with triumph. Claire's hand rested on Daniel's arm, a possessive claim, her presence a deliberate jab. The divorce papers lay between them, a final severing of the life Ava had once believed in. The lawyer, a gray-haired woman with a clipped tone, reviewed the terms. "Everything's in order," she said, sliding the documents to Ava. "Your signatures, and it's done." Ava's pen hovered, her heart a quiet storm. She glanced at Daniel, his face a mask of detachment, his eyes avoiding hers. Claire leaned closer to him, her voice low but clear. "You handled it better than I expected," she said, her smirk widening, aimed at Ava. Ava met her gaze, her lips curving into a faint, enigmatic smile. "You should be worried that I'm smiling," she said, her voice soft but edged with steel. She signed the papers with a steady hand, each stroke a release, not of pain, but of the weight she'd carried for him. She stood, her coat draped over her arm, and left without a backward glance, her heels clicking in the silence. No tears fell, only a quiet resolve, her smile a secret weapon. Outside the city hummed, indifferent to her loss, but Ava felt lighter, the divorce a door closing. On a life that no longer fit, the anonymous texts, "He's with her now," were a puzzle she'd solve, but not today. Her hand rested on her stomach, the life inside a promise of something new. Daniel and Claire's victory was hollow, a fleeting triumph Ava knew wouldn't last. Her smile lingered, a hint of knowledge they couldn't touch, a plan forming in the shadows of her heart. Weeks later, Ava sought refuge at a wellness retreat, a secluded haven nestled in rolling hills, its air thick with pine and quiet. The city's chaos felt distant, its demands replaced by the rhythm of yoga sessions and crackling fires. She'd taken leave from her firm, her team capable under Lena's care, giving her space to heal, to plan. Her pregnancy was still early, a secret shared only with her doctor, but it grounded her, a reason to rebuild. At a morning lecture, Ava sat in a sunlit room, her notebook open, her mind drifting. The speaker, Liam, was an architect in his late 30s, his warm voice filling the space as he spoke of rebuilding after loss. His brown eyes held a quiet strength, his words striking a chord. "Rock bottom isn't the end," he said, his gaze sweeping the room, pausing on Ava. "It's the solid ground we build again on." The words resonated, echoing her own resolve. After the talk, she lingered, drawn to his easy confidence, his scars subtly visible in the lines of his face. They met over herbal tea in the retreat's lounge, the fire casting shadows as they talked. "What brought you here?" Liam asked, his voice gentle, his cup cradled in calloused hands. Ava hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "A marriage that wasn't what I thought," she said, her voice low, honest, "and a chance to figure out who I am without it." He nodded, his eyes understanding, no judgment in their depths. "I lost my wife 2 years ago," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "Cancer. It broke me, but it also taught me to start over, to choose life." The confession cracked something open, their shared pain a quiet bridge. They spoke for hours, their words weaving a connection. Her ambition, his designs, their dreams reshaped by loss. Liam's laughter was a balm, his stories of rebuilding homes for communities, a spark that stirred Ava's hope. "You're not starting from nothing," he said, his smile warm. "You've got fire in you. I can see it." She smiled, a real one, her heart lighter. "Maybe I just needed someone to remind me," she said, her voice soft, a flicker of warmth blooming within. The retreat became a sanctuary, Liam's presence a steady anchor. They walked trails, shared meals, their bond growing in quiet moments. He sketched her one evening, his pencil tracing her profile, the act intimate but unforced. "You're stronger than you know," he said, handing her the drawing, his eyes holding hers. Ava's hand brushed his as she took it, her pulse quickening. "I'm learning," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the sketch a mirror of the woman she was becoming, but the city wasn't done with her. A new text arrived, the same unknown number. "They're planning a wedding. Don't let them win." Her breath caught, anger flaring. Daniel and Claire, moving forward while she rebuilt, felt like a taunt, but the sender's identity gnawed at her. Was it Lena, protective but silent? A colleague with a grudge? Or someone closer? To Claire, stirring the pot? The message was a jolt, pulling her back to the fight she'd left behind. She showed Liam the text, their trust new but real. "Someone's watching," she said, her voice tense, her hand resting on her stomach. "I don't know why, but they want me to act." He studied the screen, his jaw tightening. "You don't owe them anything," he said, his voice firm, his hand covering hers. "But if you want to face this, I'm with you." His support steadied her, a contrast to Daniel's betrayal. Ava knew the wedding was coming, a public display of Daniel's new life, but her smile, faint and fierce, held a secret. She wasn't the broken woman they expected. Her pregnancy, her growing bond with Liam, her plans for a future beyond the penthouse, they were her armor. The texts were a clue, a thread to a truth she'd uncover, but not yet. She'd face Daniel, and Claire, not with tears, but with a strength they couldn't fathom. Back in the city, Daniel and Claire planned their wedding, their engagement announced in glossy magazines. Daniel's empire thrived, but guilt gnawed at him. Ava's pregnancy a shadow he couldn't shake. Claire's ambition drove them, her grip on him tightening, but cracks formed. His hesitation, her sharp demands. The anonymous texts, unknown, to them, were a ticking clock, their sender a ghost in their midst. Ava returned to work, her presence commanding, her focus sharp. Lena greeted her with relief, but her eyes held questions Ava didn't answer. The office buzzed, the divorce old news, but Ava's calm was a mystery, her smile a quiet weapon. She met Liam in the city, their coffee dates a new rhythm, his sketches now of homes they dreamed of building together. The texts continued. "You're stronger than they know," each one a nudge, a challenge to claim her justice. The wedding day loomed, a stage for Daniel and Claire's triumph, but Ava's smile grew, her secret a flame. She knew something, they didn't, a truth tied to the texts, to her child, to the life she was forging. The city's lights burned bright, and Ava was ready, her heart no longer bound by betrayal, her future a canvas of her own design. The wellness retreat had kindled a spark in Ava, her bond with Liam a quiet anchor as she rebuilt from the ashes of her marriage. The anonymous texts, "They're planning a wedding. Don't let them win," fueled her resolve. Their mysterious sender a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. Was it Lena, a colleague, or someone tied to Claire, stirring the pot? Her pregnancy, still a closely guarded secret, gave her strength, while Daniel and Claire's upcoming wedding loomed like a taunt. Ava's smile, faint but fierce, held a truth they couldn't touch, a plan forming in the shadows of her heart. Back in the city, her return to work was a statement, her composure a shield against the office's whispers. Liam's presence, their coffee dates filled with sketches and dreams, was a promise of something new, but the texts kept coming, each one a nudge toward a reckoning. Daniel's office at his tech empire was a fortress of glass and ambition, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop. Claire stormed in, her heels clicking sharply, a stack of papers clutched in her manicured hands. Her sharp features were tight with fury, her eyes blazing as she faced Daniel, who stood behind his desk, his expression weary. "You never told me she owned 45% of your company," Claire said, her voice low, venomous, slamming the papers down. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands pausing on his laptop. "She inherited that from the investor she worked under," he said, his tone clipped, defensive. "It was a technicality." Claire's laugh was sharp, humorless. "A technicality that's tanking our expansion plans," she said, her hands trembling as she pointed to the documents. "Her shares give her veto power. She's blocking the merger, Daniel. Did you know?" He shook his head, his face paling, the weight of Ava's influence a shock he hadn't anticipated. "She never cared about the company," he said, his voice low, almost to himself. "She was focused on her firm." Claire stepped closer, her voice rising. "You underestimated her," she said, her eyes narrowing. "And now we're stuck, bleeding money, because your ex-wife isn't as broken as you thought." Before Daniels could respond, his phone rang, the screen flashing with the bank's name. He answered, his voice tense. "What's going on?" he asked, his free hand gripping the desk. The banker's voice was curt, detailing frozen funds, flagged accounts, and an investigation into irregular transactions. Daniel's eyes widened, his breath shallow as he hung up, the room suddenly too small. Claire stared at him, her confidence cracking. "What was that?" she asked, her voice softer now, fear creeping in. "The bank," he said, his voice hollow. "They've frozen everything. Someone tipped them off about the accounts." Her face drained of color, her hands clenching the papers. "Ava?" she whispered, her voice trembling, the realization hitting like a wave. She turned, her heels, unsteady, leaving Daniel alone. The city's lights a cold witness to their unraveling. Ava, unaware of the chaos in Daniel's office, was finding her footing in a new world. She'd taken a leave from her firm, focusing on a charity project with Liam, a housing initiative for women escaping hardship. His architecture studio was a haven of exposed brick and warm light, the air thick with the scent of wood and paint. Late one evening they worked side by side, blueprints spread across a table, their laughter filling the space as they debated designs. Liam reached for a brush, his hand grazing hers, a spark in the quiet. She'd smudged paint on her cheek, and he paused, his brown eyes softening. "Hold still," he said, his voice gentle, his fingers brushing the mark away, lingering on her skin. "You're not just beautiful," he said, his gaze steady, intense. "You're breathtaking when you fight for something." Ava's breath caught, her heart racing, the world narrowing to his touch. His words. She leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a collision of longing and trust. It lingered, his hands framing her face, her fingers curling into his shirt, the studio's warmth wrapping around them. But doubt flickered, Daniel's betrayal a ghost in her mind, and she pulled back, her voice trembling. "I need to be sure I'm not running into another fire," she said, her eyes searching his. Liam nodded, his hand still on hers, his voice steady. "I'll be here when you are." he said, his smile a quiet promise, no pressure in his gaze. The moment was a turning point, their connection deepening but tempered by her caution. Ava wanted to trust, to let Liam in, but her pregnancy, the texts, and Daniel's shadow held her back. She returned to the city, her days split between the project and her firm, her nights haunted by questions. The texts continued. "You're winning. Keep going." Each one a jolt, their sender a mystery that gnawed at her. Was it someone close to Claire, leaking her moves, or a stranger with their own agenda? Back at Daniel's empire, the frozen accounts sparked panic. Investors pulled back, the merger stalled, and Claire's composure frayed. She confronted Daniel at their apartment, her voice sharp. "You said Ava was out of the picture," she said, her hands shaking. "Now she's choking us with her shares. Fix this." Daniel's face was grim, his voice low. "I didn't know," he said, his hands gripping a glass of whiskey. "She never played those cards before." Claire's eyes flashed. "She's playing them now," she said, her voice cold. "And we're losing." The truth was sinking in. Ava wasn't the broken woman they'd expected. Her shares, a legacy from her mentor, gave her power they couldn't counter. Daniel remembered her ambition, her quiet strength, but he'd dismissed it, blinded by Claire's allure. Now his empire teetered, his guilt over Ava's pregnancy a weight he couldn't shake. Ava, meanwhile, grew stronger, her bond with Liam a steady light. They met for coffee, his sketches now of homes for their project, his presence a balm. "You're building something real," he said, his voice warm, handing her a design. "Not just houses, but hope." She smiled, her hand brushing his, her heart opening. "You make it feel possible," she said, her voice soft, a flicker of trust breaking through. But the texts escalated, one arriving with a photo of Claire and Daniel arguing in their car. "They're cracking," it read. Ava's pulse quickened, the sender's intent unclear. Was this a warning, a push to act, or a trap? She showed Liam, their trust a lifeline. "I need to know who's sending me," she said, her voice tense. "They're too close to this." He nodded, his jaw tight. "We'll trace it," he said, his hand steadying hers. "But you're not alone in this." The city's glow pulsed, Ava's strength a quiet fire. Her pregnancy, now showing faintly, was a secret she'd soon share with Liam a step closer to their future. The wedding was days away. Daniel and Claire's triumph a stage she'd face, not with anger, but with a power they couldn't fathom. Her shares, the texts, her growing love, they were pieces of a plan, a truth she held close. Daniel's empire faltered, Claire's confidence shattered, while Ava stood tall, her smile a promise of justice, her heart a canvas for something new. The studio's kiss lingered, a vow she'd honor when ready, Liam's patience a contrast to Daniel's haste. The city's hum was a quiet challenge, and Ava was no longer the woman betrayed, but one reborn, her future hers to shape, her child a light in the storm. The kiss in Liam's studio, tender yet charged with Ava's cautious heart, lingered as a promise of a future she wasn't ready to fully embrace. Her pregnancy, a quiet secret, and the anonymous texts, their cracking, pushed her toward a truth she couldn't yet grasp. Claire's unraveling, Daniel's empire teetering under frozen accounts, and Ava's 45% stake in his company were threads in a web tightening around her ex-husband and his mistress. The mysterious sender of the texts, still a shadow, fueled her resolve, their messages a mix of encouragement and provocation. Was it Lena, a disgruntled colleague, or someone closer to Claire? Ava's smile, sharp with hidden knowledge, was her armor as she balanced her growing bond with Liam and the impending wedding of Daniel and Claire, a stage for their hollow triumph. The city's pulse was a quiet hum, her strength a flame they couldn't extinguish. Ava was at her office, the skyline a glittering reminder of her reclaimed power, when her phone rang. Her lawyer, Ms. Kessler, spoke with a clipped urgency that cut through the morning's calm. "We need to talk about your inheritance," she said, her voice low, steady. "The shares weren't all you got from your mentor. There's a clause in the will, buried deep. I just found it." Ava's hand tightened on the phone, her heart quickening. "What clause?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with anticipation, leaning back in her chair. Kessler paused, papers rustling. "If Daniel remarries within 60 days of your divorce, the company defaults to you," she said. "Full ownership, Ava, not just your 45%. Ava's breath caught, her mind racing. She stood, pacing to the window, the city sprawling below. "How many days has it been?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, a smile, tugging at her lips. 62, Kessler said, a hint of triumph in her tone. "The wedding's tomorrow. He's too late." Ava's smile widened. The same faint, fierce curve she'd worn in the law firm's boardroom, signing the divorce papers under Claire's smirk. "So I own it all," she said, her voice soft, steady. The realization a quiet earthquake. "Every share," Kessler confirmed. "The paperwork's being finalized. You'll need to act fast. Daniel doesn't know yet." Ava hung up, her hand resting on her stomach, the life inside a silent partner in her victory. The clause was a secret her mentor, a shrewd investor who'd seen her potential, had hidden like a gift for this moment. Daniel's rush to marry Claire, his betrayal laid bare, had handed her his empire. Her smile was no longer just defiance, it was certainty, a weapon honed by months of pain and planning. The texts, "You're winning," suddenly felt like prophecy, their sender a mystery she'd soon unravel. The city buzzed below, oblivious to the shift in power, but Ava felt it, a tide turning. She texted Liam, her fingers steady. "Need to see you. Big news." His reply was instant, warm. "Studio, tonight." Her heart lifted, his patience a contrast to Daniel's haste, but the weight of her secret, the pregnancy, the company, pressed against her. She'd tell him soon, trusting the bond they were building, but first she'd face the wedding. Not as a victim, but as a victor. Meanwhile, Daniel's office was a storm of panic. The frozen accounts, stalled merger, and investor unrest had eroded his confidence. Claire, her composure frayed, paced his office, her voice sharp. "We're losing everything," she said, her hands clutching a tablet with plummeting stock charts. "You said Ava's shares wouldn't matter." Daniel rubbed his temples, his voice strained. "I didn't know she'd use them," he said, his eyes distant, Ava's pregnancy a ghost in his thoughts. "She was never this ruthless." Claire's eyes narrowed, her voice cold. "You made her this way," she said, turning away, her heels clicking as she left, doubt creeping into her resolve. A new text arrived on Ava's phone. The unknown number, a familiar shadow. "Tomorrow's their day. Make it yours." Her pulse quickened, the sender's intimacy with her life unsettling. She forwarded it to Liam, their trust a lifeline. "This is getting too close," she wrote, her heart torn between triumph and unease. Who knew her moves, her pain so well? That evening, Ava drove to Liam's studio, the city's lights a constellation of her rising power. The space was warm, blueprints scattered, the air thick with paint and possibility. Liam greeted her with a smile, his brown eyes bright, but concern flickered as he saw her expression. "What's happened?" he asked, his voice gentle, pulling her to a workbench. She took a breath, her voice steady but charged. "I own Daniel's company," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "A clause in my mentor's will. If he remarried within 60 days, it's mine." He did. Tomorrow. Liam's eyes widened, a grin breaking through. "You're incredible," he said, his hand finding hers, warm and sure. "He built an empire, and you took it without a fight." Her smile faltered, the text's shadow lingering. "Someone's helping me," she said, showing him the latest message. "They know too much, Liam. I need to find them." He nodded, his jaw tight. "We will," he said, his voice firm. "But tonight, let's celebrate you. This is your moment." They worked on their housing project, the shared purpose easing her tension. Liam sketched, his hand brushing hers, their laughter a quiet balm. "You're rewriting your story," he said, his voice warm, handing her a design for a women's shelter. "Not just for you, but for them." Her heart swelled, his faith, a mirror to her strength. "You make me believe I can," she said, her voice soft, leaning into him, their closeness a promise. The wedding was hours away, a spectacle Daniel and Claire had planned to cement their triumph. Ava wouldn't attend, but her presence would be felt, her ownership a silent thunder. She met Lena for coffee, probing gently, but her assistant's concern seemed genuine, her eyes free of deceit. "You're glowing," Lena said, her voice warm. "Whatever you're doing, it's working." Ava smiled, her hand on her stomach, the pregnancy a secret she'd share soon. "I'm finding my way," she said, her voice steady, but Lena's glance lingered, a flicker of something Ava couldn't place. Was she the sender, or just a friend? Daniel, at his penthouse, stared at Claire's wedding dress, his heart heavy. The frozen accounts, Ava's shares, and now whispers of a legal challenge gnawed at him. He called his lawyer, his voice tense. "What's Ava planning?" he asked, his hand gripping the phone. "Nothing clear," the lawyer said, his tone cautious. "But she's got leverage. Be careful." Claire overheard, her face paling. "She's coming for us," she said, her voice trembling, her confidence shattered. The wedding, once a victory, felt like a trap, Ava's smile a ghost they couldn't escape. Ava spent the night at Liam's studio, their work a refuge, their bond a light in the chaos. "Tomorrow changes everything," she said, her voice soft, her hand in his. "But I'm not alone." "You never were," he said, his eyes warm, pulling her close, their kiss a quiet vow. The morning of the wedding, Ava woke to another text. "You've won. Smile." Her heart raced, the sender's knowledge a final piece she'd soon uncover. She dressed simply, her smile sharp, and drove to her office, the city alive with her victory. Daniel and Claire's vows would echo, but Ava's power, her shares, her child, her love, would drown them out. The truth was hers, a justice she'd claim, her future a canvas painted with strength and hope. The revelation of Ava's full ownership of Daniel's company, triggered by the clause in her mentor's will, was a seismic shift, her smile now a blade honed by months of betrayal. The anonymous texts, "You've won. Smile," pushed her toward a confrontation she was ready to face, their sender still a shadow she couldn't pinpoint. Was it Lena, a colleague with insider knowledge, or someone tied to Claire's circle? Her pregnancy, a quiet secret shared only with her doctor, was beginning to show, a symbol of her strength as she stood on the cusp of reclaiming her life. Liam's steady presence, their kiss in the studio, and their shared work on the housing project anchored her, but the wedding of Daniel and Claire, set for that day, was a stage she'd overshadow. The city's pulse was a quiet hum, her power a flame they couldn't douse. The annual shareholder meeting of Daniel's tech empire was held in a sleek boardroom, its glass walls framing a city that glittered with ambition. The room buzzed with tension, investors murmuring, the air thick with rumors of frozen accounts and a stalled merger. Daniel stood at the head of the table, his suit crisp but his face strained, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. Claire sat beside him, her sharp features tight, her hands clasped to hide their tremble. They'd married hours earlier in a lavish ceremony, their vows a public triumph, but the victory felt hollow. Ava's 45% stake and the bank's investigation. looming like a storm. Ava entered unannounced, her presence a shockwave. Her tailored dress hugged her frame, the faint curve of her baby bump now visible, a quiet defiance. Her dark hair was swept back, her eyes sharp, her smile faint but unyielding. The room fell silent, heads turning, Daniel and Claire freezing as if struck. Daniel's jaw dropped, his hands gripping the table while Claire's eyes widened, her smirk vanishing, replaced by a flicker of fear. Ava stood at the table's edge, her voice clear, steady, cutting through the hush. "Effective immediately, you're both relieved of your duties," she said, her gaze locking onto Daniel, then Claire, each word a deliberate strike. Daniel stood, his voice hoarse, disbelieving. "You wouldn't," he said, his hands trembling, his eyes darting to the board members seeking allies. "This is my company, Ava." Her smile sharpened, her voice calm but lethal. "Check the shareholder clause," she said, sliding a document across the table, its pages marked with legal precision. "You gave me everything the day you gave her that ring." The room erupted. In whispers, board members flipping through the papers, their faces paling as the clause's truth sank in. If Daniel remarried within 60 days of the divorce, the company defaulted to Ava. Full ownership, not just her inherited 45%. 62 days had passed. The wedding a fatal misstep. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, her voice a whisper. "You knew," she said, her eyes locking onto Ava, fear giving way to fury. Ava met her gaze, unflinching. "I learned," she said, her voice soft but edged with steel. "You built your future on lies. I built mine on truth." She turned, her heels clicking as she walked out, her head high, the boardroom's chaos fading behind her. Daniel sank into his chair, his empire, stripped away, while Claire stared at the papers, her triumph shattered. Ava's baby bump, subtle but undeniable, was a final blow. A life Daniel had rejected, now a symbol of her victory. The city's skyline gleamed through the glass, indifferent to their downfall. But Ava felt its pulse, her power a quiet roar. Outside, she paused, her hand on her stomach, the weight of the moment settling. The anonymous texts had led her here, their sender a ghost who'd known her strength, her rights. She texted Liam, her fingers steady. "It's done. Meet me at the studio." His reply was instant, warm. "Proud of you. On my way." Her heart lifted, his love a contrast to Daniel's betrayal, but the mystery of the texts gnawed at her. Who had guided her, and why? Daniel's office was a tomb of regret, his empire now Ava's. He stared at Claire, his voice raw. "You pushed me to this," he said, his hands shaking, guilt over Ava's pregnancy a weight he couldn't shed. Claire's eyes flashed, her voice cold. "You chose me," she said, standing to leave, her heels unsteady. "Don't blame me," for her strength. Their marriage, barely hours old, cracked under the strain, Ava's victory a mirror to their lies. The board scrambled, investors pulling out, the company's future uncertain without Ava's guidance. Daniel called his lawyer desperate, but the clause was ironclad, her ownership absolute. He remembered Ava's ambition, her quiet fire, and realized he'd lost her long before the divorce. Ava drove to Liam's studio, the city alive with her triumph. The workshop was a haven, its warm light and scattered blueprints a world of possibility. Liam greeted her with a hug, his brown eyes bright with pride. "You did it," he said, his voice warm, pulling her close. "You took everything." She smiled, her hand on his chest, her voice soft. "Not everything," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I'm building something new. With you." They sat, sharing coffee, her victory a quiet hum. She told him about the boardroom, her words, their shock. "I didn't just want the company," she said, her voice steady. "I wanted them to see me, not broken, but whole." Liam's hand covered hers, his voice gentle. "They saw," he said, his smile a promise. "And so do I." She hesitated, then spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm pregnant," she said, her eyes searching his. "I've wanted to tell you, but I needed to be sure of me." His face softened, his hand tightening around hers. "I'm here," he said, his voice fierce, tender. "For you, for the baby. We'll build this together." The confession was a bridge, their kiss a vow, deeper than before, her fears easing in his warmth. The texts, though, lingered, a final puzzle. She showed him the latest. "You've won. Smile." Her voice tense. "Someone knew about the clause," she said. "They led me to this." Liam studied the message, his jaw tight. "We'll find them," he said, his hand steadying hers. "But today, this is your win." Ava nodded, her smile returning, the mystery a shadow she'd face later. She'd hired an investigator, tracing the texts, suspecting Lena or a colleague, close to Claire, but the truth could wait. Her victory was hers, her baby bump a quiet strength, Liam's love a foundation. The company was hers to reshape, her marketing firm thriving, her housing project with Liam a beacon for others. Daniel and Claire's wedding, a fleeting spectacle, was overshadowed by her boardroom strike, their empire now hers. Back at the penthouse, Daniel packed, Claire's absence a silent fracture. He found a photo of Ava, her smile from their early days, and guilt choked him. Claire moved to a hotel, her plans in ruins, the city's glow a reminder of her loss. A final text arrived on Ava's phone. "You're free now." She stared at it, her heart racing, the sender's identity a step away. The city's lights burned, her future a canvas of justice, love, and a child who'd know her strength. Ava walked into Liam's arms, her smile unbroken, her heart no longer bound by lies. The boardroom confrontation was a triumph that echoed through the city. Ava's words, "You gave me everything the day you gave her that ring." Stripping Daniel and Claire of their empire. Her ownership of the company, secured by the hidden clause, was a justice born of their betrayal. Her baby bump a quiet defiance as she walked out, leaving them shattered. The anonymous texts culminating in "You're free now" were a lingering mystery, their sender a shadow she was close to unmasking. Liam's unwavering support, their kiss in the studio, and her pregnancy confession had deepened their bond, a foundation for a future she was ready to claim. The city's pulse was a distant hum, Ava's strength a flame that burned brighter than Daniel's fading star. Months later, the seaside cabin Liam owned was a haven of weathered wood and salt air, its windows open to the ocean's ceaseless rhythm. Ava stood on the porch, her dark hair loose, her hand resting on her now prominent belly, the waves a soothing counterpoint to the life stirring within her. The city's chaos felt a world away, her marketing firm thriving under her remote guidance. The tech empire she'd claimed from Daniel reshaped into a force for innovation and equity. Her housing project with Liam had broken ground, shelters rising for women like the one she'd been, resilient, unbroken. Liam stepped beside her, his presence warm, steady, his brown eyes reflecting the sea's shimmer. He carried 2 mugs of tea, handing her one, his smile a quiet anchor. "The past still visits you?" he asked, his voice gentle, his gaze searching hers, knowing the weight of Daniel's betrayal, Claire's smirk, the texts that had guided her victory. Ava sipped the tea, her voice soft but certain. "Sometimes," she said, her eyes on the horizon, where sky met water. "But it doesn't stay." He nodded, his hand finding hers, his fingers intertwining with a tenderness that eased her lingering scars. "You've built something stronger," he said, his voice warm, his free hand resting gently on her belly, a silent vow to the child they'd raised together. "You ready to build a future?" Her smile was radiant, free of the faint edge it once carried. "I already started," she said, her voice steady, her eyes meeting his. "With you." They kissed, slow and sure, the ocean's murmur framing them, their love a quiet triumph over the storms they'd faced. The cabin was their refuge, a place to plan, to dream, its simplicity a contrast to the penthouse Ava had left behind. The moment was a new beginning, their bond a canvas for a life untainted by lies. The city, though distant, wasn't silent. Ava's investigator had traced the anonymous texts to Lena, her assistant, whose loyalty had masked a deeper motive. Lena confessed in a letter delivered to Ava's office. She'd known about Daniel's affair early, her own sister betrayed by a similar man, driving her to protect Ava. The photos, the tips about the claws, she'd gathered them quietly, her silence a shield until Ava was ready to act. "You deserved to win," Lena wrote, asking for forgiveness, offering her resignation. Ava didn't accept it. She called Lena, her voice firm but kind. "You saw me when I couldn't see myself," she said, standing in her office, the skyline, a testament to her power. "Stay. We'll build something better." Lena agreed, her voice thick with relief. Their bond strengthened by truth. The texts, once a mystery, were now a gift, a reminder of Ava's resilience, her ability to inspire loyalty even in silence. She shared the truth with Liam, his laughter warm as they sat by the cabin's fire. "You collect allies like blueprints," he said, his hand squeezing hers. "It's who you are." Her company, once Daniel's, was thriving, its profits funding her housing project and others like it. She'd hired a new CEO, a woman with a vision for ethical tech, freeing Ava to focus on her firm and her growing family. Daniel, stripped of his empire, had retreated from the city, his marriage to Claire dissolving in a flurry of arguments and legal battles. Claire, her ambition unmoored, faded into obscurity, her name a footnote in the industry Ava now shaped. Ava and Liam's life took root in the cabin, their weekends spent planning the shelter's expansion, sketching homes for others, their laughter a melody. Her pregnancy progressed, the baby's kicks a quiet joy, shared in moments by the sea. Liam built a crib, his hands steady, his designs a love letter to their future. "This kid's lucky," he said one evening, sanding the wood, his eyes bright. "They've got you." "And you," Ava said, her voice soft, her hand on his shoulder, their bond a promise kept. The city called them back, but they returned on their terms. Ava's office was a hub of creativity, her team energized by her vision. Lena, now a partner, led campaigns with a fire Ava admired, their friendship a quiet strength. Liam's studio grew, his designs for the shelters earning praise, his love for Ava a constant in their busy days. They dined in small cafes, walked the city's parks, their hands entwined, the skyline a canvas of their shared dreams. One evening, back at the cabin, Ava stood on the porch, Liam's arms around her, the waves a steady heartbeat. "I thought I'd lost everything," she said, her voice low, reflective, the memory of Daniel's betrayal a faint scar. "But I found more than I knew I could." Liam kissed her temple, his voice warm. "You didn't just find it," he said, his hand on her belly, feeling a kick. "You built it, and we'll keep building." She turned, her lips meeting his. The kiss a vow renewed, the ocean's song a backdrop to their love. The past, Daniel's affair, Claire's smirk, the divorce, had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. Her victory wasn't just the company, but the life she'd forged, the child she'd raise, the man who saw her strength. The texts, Lena's secret, were a chapter closed, their truth a spark that had ignited her power. The city's lights, visible in the distance, were a reminder of her journey. But the cabin was home, its simplicity a mirror to her heart. Ava's firm grew, her shelters multiplied, her legacy one of hope, not revenge. Daniel's name faded, his empire hers to redefine, while Claire's ambitions crumbled, her choices a cautionary tale. Ava's smile, once a weapon, was now a gift, shared with Liam, with their unborn child. With the women her work lifted. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ava leaned into Liam, their hands entwined, the waves a quiet promise. "This is enough," she said, her voice steady, her heart full. "More than enough," he said, his voice a vow, their kiss a seal on a future they'd shape together. The screen faded, their silhouettes framed by the sea, a testament to a love that had risen from betrayal, a life built on truth, a beginning that was hers to claim. The city's hum was a distant song, Ava's heart no longer bound by pain, her future a horizon of endless light. Do you believe real happiness is the best revenge? Share your thoughts below. And if you stayed to the end, drop a heart in the comments to let me know you were here. See you in the next one, and do not forget to subscribe for more stories.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.